Hello, and welcome back to Biohacking with Brittany, and welcome everybody who is watching this live. So, I am recording this podcast episode live in my community, the Longer Life community, and I just decided to give this a go and try something new and see how it works out. So, I'm recording this episode live. It will be published in my community, and then afterwards I will be doing a Q&A. So everyone watching live, you get to ask all of your questions to me live on our call, and I'm happy to help, whether it's about peptides or longevity or nutrition or all of the things. So super excited about that. And I might make this more of a feature going on. We'll see. Depends how it goes. But otherwise, for everybody who is listening at home or driving your car, cool, welcome. I am so glad you are here. So, just a little update with how things are going this week and the last couple of weeks have been crazy in the best way. I have, yeah, like just so many things. I have met with, I don't even know how many, maybe 10 women in the last 2 weeks. And we have been doing a lot of work on healing ourselves through many different methods. And a lot of women come to me for peptides, which is cool. And I'm very helpful and I'm happy to be helpful. And we also do a lot of work uncovering what is actually going on. And I'm building this out into my new, oh my gosh, I don't want to say program, but I'm upgrading everything in the fall. And this has been something that's been on my heart lately. I've been thinking about it, doing a lot of visualization about it, and also doing a lot of manifestation and things like that. So essentially, I very much feel the call to bridge the biohacking, health optimization world and the woo world. And what I mean by that, and I had a dream about this, I'll tell you about in a second, but what I mean by that is there is so much we can say about different healing modalities that work from the outside in. And peptides is a great example for that. You can get so much results with peptides. Like you can, for body composition, energy, hair, skin, sleep, all the things. And all the other modalities that kind of work like that, right? Supplements, nutrition, herbs, exercise, lifestyle, sauna, cold therapy, like all of these different cool gadgets, tech, all of that. I have done so much of that, and my entire brand and my even my life is kind of like built around that, to be honest, of biohacking, and it's been very successful. Okay. The reality is there's so much more to life and the world than that. There is so much more deeper meaning to things, and there's so much more that we need to bring into play. And I started this year, 2026, talking about intuitive longevity, and I was doing these masterminds or classes and things like that. And then when I opened my practice this summer, which has been a long time since I've opened up again to one-on-one publicly, it was just coming up again and again and again with women. Like and the same sentences would come through again, like things like, I'm always in fight or flight, or I'm the one leading the healthy habits in my home and my husband isn't healthy and it's all on me. Or just like these little like things that women would say that would indicate there's misalignment going on here. And what can we do to bring you back into alignment? And that doesn't mean like leave your partner, quit your job, move to Brazil. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there's a way to have alignment in your life that's purpose and passion, and ultimately it contributes to you becoming healthier and you reaching your health goals. And that is what we need to talk about. And so that is why I am upgrading everything I'm doing to really reiterate that to women of like, yes, let's do all the physical things and all of the things that go from the outside in. And we also need to do the work on the inside out. So I had this dream this week. It was so weird. Essentially, I was writing on a piece of paper and I was writing the words, my soul mission, like my soul's mission. And I wrote down what I was saying here, like the body work. And then I wrote, and in all capitals, and then the mind work, the spiritual side, the energetics side, and things like that. And so which includes nervous system regulation, breathwork, meditation, journaling, religion, if you're religious, anything like that. And anything someone might say is woo woo or woo can fall into that world. But the reality is, and I will preach this, this will be the hill that I die on, is like, it doesn't matter what you call it. It doesn't matter which modality, even within that bucket that you align with or agree with, it has a place. And so we need to bring this into practice. We can't just throw cold plunge protocols at women or peptide protocols at women. And so that is what I'm doing now. And I'm upgrading a lot. So the way that my practice is, will be incorporating all four of these new pillars. And I don't know if I should say this yet, but I'm redoing my planner, my peptide planner, and I'm changing it. And I'm releasing the physical copy. And what's so interesting, the more you meditate and the more you go inward, you see, like, I was so hesitant on pulling the trigger on the physical copy of the peptide planner. I was so hesitant. And then I started like thinking about it and meditating on it. And I was like, why? Why am I like, there's this like hesitancy here. Why? And when I uncovered it, is like, it's actually because it's not supposed to be a peptide planner. It's supposed to be a woman's longevity planner that incorporates peptides as one facet of it. So I'm currently redoing that and cannot wait to see that in person. It's going to be so beautiful, and it's so pretty already. More details to come. Anyway, so all of this to say that there are going to be a lot of changes around here. I'm probably going to change the name of my podcast. I'm probably going to change a lot of things. Biohacking with Brittany will probably be upgraded in the next month or two as I evolve and as my customers and my clients and my audience and everybody evolves. So stay tuned for that. And if you want to join my community in the meantime, you can. That's the Longer Life community. This is where we do our community calls. We do Q&A. I have so much content in there. I have a full peptide suite, everything you need to know about peptides. I have a full fertility suite, everything you need to know about fertility. And I'm going to be doing ones on other things coming up as well. So that is like what is going on behind the scenes. Lots of things to say the least. And today we are going to be talking about ovarian longevity. Now, this is interesting. This is not what you might think it might be about. I want to talk about specifically what we see for women and aging and longevity in relationship to the actual ovaries. What science has been done, what studies have been done, and what are we going to do about it? And how does this connect to these four pillars that I'm talking about? Nourish, stack, live, and align. And I'm going to dive right into that. So you might have heard that your ovaries age 2.5 times faster than the rest of your body. And I went looking for that study. I went looking for the information, and I actually could not find it. It actually came from a single blog post. And that blog post was actually a supplement company saying that. So there was no citation, there was no linked paper, and there was no attribution at all. And then it got picked up by Time and CNN and other longevity podcasts. And now people just repeat it as a fact. But we really actually need to pause and look at what we do know about the ovaries and what we can do about them. There was a Stanford, Oregon aging clock site. And this was what people talk about when they're trying to back up that study or that claim. Those papers measured 11 organs. So they measured the heart, brain, liver, lung, kidney, muscle, pancreas, gut, immune, artery, and fat. So not just organs, but other here. And nobody has ever put an ovary in the organ aging clock, not even once. The most cited number in women's longevity is actually just a rumor. Now, that doesn't mean to say that it's not happening. We just don't have proof. It just means one quote that people are saying actually doesn't really come from anywhere. So let's talk about numbers that are actually real. And honestly, it might be worse than the 2.5. So there was I'm going to botch this name. I'll try to say it correctly. Yusin Suh runs this lab out of Columbia that actually does this work. And her finding shows that aging in the ovary is actually 15 to 20 years earlier than it is in any other tissue in the body. So that's actually worse. The same molecular signals you would see in an old brain or an old kidney at the age of 60, sometimes you could actually see in the ovaries at 40. So your ovaries are not a fertility organ. They are the organ that sets the pace for your bones, your heart, your brain, and how long you live. And almost nobody is optimizing them. When we talk about optimizing women's health, we often just talk about hormones. But what about the ovaries? Like, what about the actual organs that are in women that are aging? So today, we're going to dive way more into this and look at what we can do from this actual standpoint. So I want to talk about why this matters right now before we get into more stats here that I've pulled. The Global Wellness Summer named ovarian health at the center of women's longevity for 2026. This month alone, a paper in Cell out of the Buck Institute framed the ovary as a whole body communication hub for metabolism, bone, immunity, and brain. And last November, the FDA started pulling the boxed warning off of menopausal hormonal therapy, which I have talked about. So this means that there's research being done. People are studying things, people are looking at it, and we are talking about it more and more. And it's finally becoming more of the center of what we are seeing in women's health. Less than 2% of venture funding went to women's health. That sucks. Like, that actually sucks. Like, think about that. About 90% of that went to fertility, of that 2%. Fertility. And now, mind you, I'm the first person to tell you it's so important. I did a full 90-day fertility cleanse optimization with my husband. We got pregnant right away, all the things. I have a whole fertility suite in my community. Like, I had a PCOS scare. I know how important fertility is. But 90% of that went to fertility. The money follows the ovary only when it's looking at making babies. And that's really interesting because we could unpack that and the misogyny likely underneath that as well. The moment it stops, we stop studying it. And this beyond the scope of this podcast episode, but this is kind of sad and actually points to further issues that we're seeing in society and cultural issues of women are only as important as they are when they're in their fertile years, and afterwards they're not as important in society. Menopause research got $56 million in a year, and that was against a total of 48 billion that they had, the budget that they had. So this is happening in multiple places. Like, not only there's lack of funding, or when there is funding, it's going to fertility. It's also in places like the NIH. It's also in venture funding. It's also in the research studies. It's also in all of it. Like, it's really this lack of understanding how important the ovary is. And it is important, the ovaries are. And we are getting to a place where it is getting more talked about as I'm doing this podcast episode, but we're still not even close to where it should be. So your ovaries are an endocrine organ. About 1 million follicles at birth. And that is the whole allotment, and they were made before you were born, which is really cool. So if you are, it's actually really to wrap your mind around it. Like, if you are pregnant with your daughter, she is making her eggs that will then be her kids while she's in you. So not only are you carrying her, you're also carrying future generations, like your grandkids, at the same time, which is crazy. Roughly 100,000 are left by the age of 30, and fewer than 1,000 at menopause. Average age of menopause in North America is 51. This is the only organ in your body with a scheduled shutdown built into it. Your liver does not have an expiry date, but your ovaries do. And it is not just releasing an egg once a month. It is running an endocrine factory: estradiol, progesterone, testosterone, AMH, and inhibin. Estrogen is not just a feelings hormone, despite what you might think. It is structural. It is about bone remodeling, keeping your arteries flexible, lipid handling, and it is neuroprotective in the brain. So when the ovary goes quiet, you do not just lose your periods. You lose a maintenance system that was protecting your skeleton, your blood vessels, and your neurons. Menopause is not a reproductive event with side effects. It is a systemic aging event that happens to also end your periods at the same time. And I have this conversation a lot with my clients of, yes, you just like, I have a lot of clients. So you might have just gone through menopause, okay? And you don't have your periods anymore. But what we need to realize here is the lack of estrogen means so much for other areas of your life, exactly like this is talking about. It to your blood vessels and your cholesterol. It relates to your bones and protecting your bones and your muscle mass. So everything that was, I don't want to say functioning optimally, but was functioning at an easier rate, at a better rate, smoother, whatever you want to call it. Once you hit postmenopausal, it's now tougher to keep those things going. It doesn't mean it's not possible because so many women across the world are doing it. It just means you have to change your approach. What worked for you at 30 is not to work for you at 55. How could it? Your body is completely different. Your ovaries are producing way less hormones. So how could you do the same workouts, eat the same, have the same lifestyle habits, and expect to look the same and feel the same? That doesn't make sense. So it is not just this reproductive event. Oh, you hit menopause, you can't have a baby anymore. No, 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 no. That is like such basic knowledge. It's, oh, you hit, every single woman will go through menopause. And this affects every single area of your life. And what can we do about it so that you can still feel good, look good, and feel in alignment with yourself? So a couple other things to mention here is senescence. People love senescence, such a longevity buzzword. Senescence. So Sue's lab found senescent cells tripled in aged human ovaries and identified mTOR as an ovary-specific aging pathway. So that study had 8 donors, which is not a lot. So it's thin, but it still has some data. The other part of this is fibrosis. So UCSF published in Science of last October, and this was about 100,000 ovarian cells. They found scarring in the ovaries of women in their 50s earlier than comparable scarring shows up in the lung or liver. So again, we are seeing that the ovaries are aging faster, showing signs of senescent cells, which are old dead cells that don't want to die and don't want to get rid of from the body, which we have to clean up, and fibrosis and showing scarring. And so there's multiple factors that are happening here in the ovaries. And this like quote that I read says, it's not that the seeds run out, it is that the soil goes hard. Now, what's really important here just to remember is that it's not that you did anything wrong necessarily, or it's not that you should be afraid of menopause or there should be any type of, I don't know, negative associations with it. Because again, it happens to every single woman. It's more of how do we move through it in an easier, more aligned, more nourishing place and space, knowing that the ovaries are aging and they need more support than we might think they do. Okay. So there's more studies here that we can go through, and I do want to talk about a couple of these, but I have honestly already mentioned a bunch of them, but let's go through them. So there was a single study that was also done, and this was by Levine and Horvath. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing your names right, in PNAS, and about women across 4 cohorts here. So what this basically showed was that earlier menopause measurably accelerated epigenetic age. Both ovaries removed accelerated aging in blood and more time since menopause, more acceleration. And hormone therapy actually reduced it. So losing ovarian function speeds up the clock everywhere else in your body. And giving the hormones back partially slows it down again, which is why hormone replacement therapy is becoming so common. Part of why. That is as close to proof that the ovary is a pacemaker as human data gets. I love this. I think it's really important, and it goes to show that HRT is becoming more popular, is something we should be talking about, and is finally losing any like stigma that might still have been there. I'm going to fast forward here and I want to talk about your labs before we get into what you can do about ovarian aging. So, every single client I have, I really encourage them to get their labs done, whether it's through Function Health, who I'm finally talking to about being a partner with, or through your doctor, whatever you have access to. Okay. Labs are really helpful for this. And I'm going to tell you what to get and what ranges to look at. So, this is in my stack pillar. And labs, if you are going to run them, I would say try do it every quarter, every 6 months, at least once a year, depending on what you have access to. So AMH is one of the first things that we look at. There's first things that we talk about or think about when we think about the ovaries. AMH and what it actually is. So this is made by the granulosa cells of your small growing follicles. It's a proxy for the size of the remaining growing follicle pool that you have. It is about quantity, not quality, and it is not an egg health test. It's not a fertility test. People just use it as a association. It's not like if you have a high AMH number, you're going to get pregnant super easily and you're going to have no issues. And vice versa if you have low. It's a general indicator. And if you do this test, please just like take it with a grain of salt. Okay. The one advantage of looking at this is that it's actually relatively stable across your menstrual cycle. And so you can draw it any day. Typically, the age ranges and what we see here. So age 20 to 24 is, and this is nanograms per millimeter per milliliter. 1.2 to 12. Age 25 to 29 is 0.89 to 9.9. Age 30 to 34 is 0.58 to 8.1. Age 35 to 39, 0.15 to 7.5. And age 40 to 44, 0.03 to 5.5. I will put that in the show notes so you guys can actually measure against. So if you look at 35 to 39 here, right? Normal spans a 50-fold range. That is the most under any communicated fact about this whole test. That is why so many women get a number back and spiral. Like that is a huge span for that single number. So there are some rough points, but really here are rough midpoints. The decline rate is what I would think about with this. And that says like roughly 0.2 nanograms a year through 40 and then slower. The big one that people look at and like the science that looks at this. So there was a study in JAMA by Steiner and 750 women aged 30 to 44 were looked at, had no history of infertility, and they were trying to get pregnant naturally. So the low AMH was under 0.7 versus normal. There was conception by 6 cycles, 65% versus 62%. And by 12 cycles, 84% of them got pregnant versus 75%. So the low AMH group did numerically better, and neither difference was statistically real. So high FSH gave exactly the same non-result, which is so fascinating. A low AMH does not mean you cannot get pregnant this month. It means you would make fewer eggs if somebody stimulated your ovaries with drugs. Completely different questions, okay? And I hope that's really reassuring to you if you are trying to get pregnant or you're later on in life or whatever it is, because it's not just this one number that you need to look at. A little caveat here, which is worth saying, is that if you are on birth control, your AMH is wrong. Hormonal contraception suppresses AMH by roughly 14 to 55%, which is crazy, depending on the method and the duration. One study showed a 51% drop by 9 weeks on the pill. So this is reversible. Markers recover within 3 to 6 months of stopping. So if you want a real AMH level, come off of hormonal contraception for about 3 months first, maybe even 6 months, and then get tested. The other things to look for in terms of labs, I will talk about quickly, and I've had all of these done. So you can do an antral follicle count. This is the underrated one, and it's not done as much. So this is a direct ultrasound count of follicles, 2 to 10 millimeters across both ovaries. Now, the bands and where this stands. So under 4 is extremely low. 4 to 9 is low, 10 to 13 is somewhat reduced, 14 to 21 normal, 22. There's some medians by age you can look at, but this is good because it is a direct count. Like you literally count them on the screen. And unlike AMH, it is still valid while you're on the pill, which can be really helpful. Limitation though, it is operator dependent. So there is human error that can happen here. And it's only as good as the person holding the probe. So maybe you do it a couple times and you take the average. AMH and follicle count only, oh my gosh, correlate at about 0.62. They are not interchangeable and I would get both done. Next, when we talk about labs, we talk about FSH and estradiol. And ideally, you want to do these on day 3 of your cycle, which is likely when you still have your period, which sucks to do labs when you have your period. But this is what we see with the change of hormones over the menstrual cycle. So you can draw them together on day 3, and the estradiol is quality control on the FSH. So FSH under 10 is normal, and above 11 is moderately elevated. There's a trap here. So estradiol over 60 to 80 with a normal FSH is a false reassurance. Early recruitment already suppressed the FSH. So you need to look at both numbers together. And never compare AMH results from 2 different labs. There is no international standard. The same sample on different platforms can differ by -20 to +45%. If you're tracking over time, same lab every single time. Something else that I do want to mention just with the AMH note is that this relates to PMOS, or PCOS is what it used to be called. So yes, I had my whole scare with this and I have gone through this and understand how complicated it is. Women with PMOS run AMH about 3.5 times higher. And yeah, when I had this scare, my AMH was really high. And that is not extra time. That does not mean your ovaries are not aging at the same rate. It is a stalled pool of small follicles that are not being selected. That is anovulation sometimes and not abundance. Okay, so like put 2 and 2 together here because that's not what's going on. And the measured menopause delay over 20 years was about 5% of the reproductive timeline. So call it 1.5 to 2.5 years, real, but small. So that means that if you have a lot of follicles and maybe you have PMOS or maybe you don't, but you still have a lot of follicles, it could potentially delay your menopause, but only by 1.5 to 2.5 years, not a whole decade, not anything longer. Okay, so, and then obviously PMOS has its own set of health issues and symptoms and signs and things you actually have to think about that can be complicated that impact this. So it's not necessarily like it's like, yeah, there's, it's not necessarily like something that you want to have. Okay. Talk about cysts, polyps, and ovulation and other things here because we are talking about the ovaries and this can happen. So cysts. I've had cysts before and I've had painful cysts. I've had a few different types and I think they're very, very common. So let's talk about the different types of cysts. So adnexal cysts show up on about 47% of ultrasounds. That's how common they are. Most of them are your ovary doing its job and it's actually nothing you need to worry about. Functional cysts are the common ones as well, the other common ones. And this is a follicle that does not rupture, keeps growing, or the corpus luteum seals and fills with fluid after ovulation. 70 to 80% resolve on their own, typically within 2 to 3 weeks. I've had this done. I've had this. I have seen this on my ultrasound before. Like I have seen a cyst that has been filled with fluid that was causing pain. The issue is when they get big. So that is ovulation working. It's not ovulation failing. A normal follicle before ovulation is already 2 centimeters. It only gets called a cyst when it's over at 2.5 centimeters. Birth control pills do not shrink a cyst that you already have, by the way. And this has been peer reviewed. And what Cochrane looked at here of 8 different randomized trials, 686 women. Not one showed any benefit over just waiting. The pill prevents new functional cysts. It does not do anything to the ones that you're worried about right now. And that is not a reason to necessarily go on birth control, in my opinion. There are so many side effects with it. And so that is not what we want to do when, oh, you have a cyst. Oh, you might have one again, so you're going to go on birth control now. Like, no. There's a lot more we can do. The radiology consensus thresholds, which are far more relaxed than most women are ever told. So premenopausal, a simple cyst up to 3 centimeters is reported as normal. No follow-up. Follow-up starts at 5 to 7 centimeters. I don't remember what mine was. So before I got pregnant in 2020, just thinking back to it. So I had a cyst that summer and it was a hemorrhagic cyst, which means it had blood in it. And it was definitely cause for concern because it was creating pain. And it was one of the reasons that we started our baby steps 90-day protocol to get pregnant for fertility. And we started it that summer was because I didn't want to wait. I didn't know how long it was going to take me to get pregnant. And lo and behold, I got pregnant on the first try. So all this to say is if you have a cyst, it does not mean that it's going to impact your fertility or not allow you to get pregnant. Okay. Postmenopausal cysts are different. Up to 1 centimeter is normal. Anything above 3 to 5 gets followed and looked at. So just understand, again, the ovaries are different, right? The ones that do not resolve. So these are called dermoids. They're about 20% of ovarian tumors and they peak at age 20 to 40. They never resolve, but they grow at 1.8 millimeters a year. So a 3 centimeter dermoid at 30 is about 5 centimeters at 60. You can get surgery for larger ones. They are also the most common mass found in ovarian torsion. Ovarian torsion is wild. If you don't know what that is, it's basically when the ovaries twist in your body. Like they actually twist. It's very serious. It's like fatal. Yeah, it's very, very scary. And we obviously have to talk about endometriosis here as well. So there's something called chocolate cysts, and 17 to 44% of women with endometriosis get them. 28% are bilateral, and you can get surgery for them. And obviously, there's a lot of endometriosis surgery you can get as well to help with the symptoms of it. So what surgery costs you and what this one study pulled was that there's a prospective cohort, 104 women, AMH measured before and after the cystectomy. At 1 month, AMH was down 52%. At 6 months, it was down 55%. And at 12 months, it was down 43%. So that's interesting. And if both ovaries were operated on, there was no recovery at all. 12 months out, AMH was down 83% and it stayed there. So that's really scary if that's something that you are dealing with and you want to continue to have children. Risk of premature ovarian efficiency after ovarian cystectomy runs 2.4 to 13%. So without just fear mongering with this, if you have endometriosis, the endometrioma itself already damages the ovary. So the follicle count is lower on the affected side before anyone even operates. So surgery adds injury on top of injury that's already there. So this is not a reason not to ovulate or operate. It's to understand the full picture here. So get your AMH level tested and a follicle count measured before any planned ovarian surgery. Ask your surgeon specifically whether they will use suturing or a sealant instead of bipolar cautery for bleeding. Because a 2026 network meta-analysis of 21 trials found that choice alone was worth almost a full point on AMH. Wow. And if it is bilateral or recurrent, talk about fertility preservation first. Okay. Other medical condition here that I think we should talk about is premature ovarian insufficiency, POI. And the number that's like commonly talked about here is that it impacts 1 in 100 women. The 2024 European guideline revised it about to be actually 3.5%, which is actually closer to 1 in 30. the criteria also changed, and this is practical. So irregular cycles or no cycles for 4 months plus an FSH over 25 on a single draw. The old rule was 40 twice. Now it's just once. A woman with an FSH of 30 would have been sent home under the old rule and diagnosed under the new one. And so we are making changes here, and that's good. POI is not early menopause. Menopause is permanent. POI fluctuates. Ovarian activity comes back. Between 4 and 10% of women with POI conceive spontaneously, which means if you do not want to be pregnant, you still actually need to use contraception. Hormone therapy is not contraception, and women get told you're in menopause, you cannot get pregnant, and that is simply wrong. And I hope that's really encouraging for you if you do have POI and you are looking to get pregnant. So there are a bunch of tests that you can do here and labs. So workup on diagnosis, karyotype, Fragile X pre-mutation testing, adrenal antibodies, and your thyroid. The Fragile X one matters for your siblings and your existing kids and not just you. And hormone replacement therapy is standard care until about 51 at replacement doses, meaning no less than 2 milligrams of oral estradiol or 100 micrograms of transdermal, higher than standard postmenopausal dosing. Because a 32-year-old with POI is not being supplemented above baseline. She is being replaced to the levels she should still have. Applying risk logic from a study of women in their 60s to her is a category error, and there needs to be concern here. And it also leads to undertreatment. Okay? So we're really getting into the weeds here, and that's what I really just wanted to point out in terms of all of the things that can happen with ovaries. And I feel like I barely even honestly went deep on any of them, but there is a lot there. Now, let's get into what we can do, what we know, what does the science say about food and nourishment for the ovaries? So we don't have a lot of science on this, to be honest. We don't have a lot of data, but I am going to show you what we do have. So there's this famous study, the UK women's cohort was 914 women, and one daily portion of oily fish plus 3.3 years later menopause. Legumes plus about 1 year, refined pasta and rice minus 1.5 years. So that's saying the oily fish added 3.3 years before they went into menopause, which is crazy. And then on the opposite side of that, we have refined pasta and rice, which actually brought it on sooner at 1.5 years. A daily serving of salmon buying you 3 extra years of ovarian functioning is not biologically credible. And the authors were also very suspect about this as well, who flagged that the effect shrank when they adjusted for age. So the corroboration is weak here. There was a meta-analysis covering 91,000 women that looked at 89 food groups and 38 nutrients and concluded the evidence remains controversial. In that review, more green and yellow vegetables actually tracked with earlier menopause. So here is the recommendation when we look at food, okay? To be clear, we do not have enough data or enough science to say, eat this and it's going to extend the life of your ovary. Eat this, it's going to slow down how fast your ovaries are aging. We can look at the mechanisms here, again, if we look at senescent cells or the mTOR pathway, and we can distill from that and how it might impact the ovaries, but we can't say eat salmon every single day and menopause is going to hit you later. It's just, we're not at that point yet. And so we need to think more about the mechanisms that lead to faster aging, the root causes versus the ovaries themselves. And even inflammation, right? Eating a low inflammatory diet technically would help your whole entire body age slower because you're not increasing your inflammation in every single organ and not just the ovaries. So my recommendation as a nutritionist would be focus on whole foods, really, really high quality food. And yeah, it's expensive and hard to get. I'm talking grass-fed, grass-finished meat, grass-fed, grass-finished milk, A2 milk, if that is what you digest better. My family right now, we're on sheep's milk. That's a story for another time. It's very high in protein, grass-fed, grass-finished. It's naturally A2 protein. We do much better on it. Organic wherever you can, local if you can, farmers market, from farm, all of that. Like quality, quality, quality when it comes to food. Way less food from your packages, more from your fridge, less from your pantry, things like that. Whole foods, paleo, anti-inflammatory, really the way to go. And that whole recommendation is kind of my recommendation for everything. It's not just for let me slow down the aging of my ovaries. It's fertility, right? When I work with clients and we're increasing their fertility, we're talking about the same thing. Yes, we might add in way more omegas and we might add in way more antioxidants. But again, if you were to take that same philosophy of adding more omegas, which are very high anti-inflammatory, and you are also adding more antioxidants through berries and certain foods, that would still be helping you be healthier, which would ultimately be helping your ovaries as well. So it all is connected when it comes to nutrition. We just don't have the studies that show, okay, Brittany ate a handful of blueberries for 30 years and she went through menopause later. Like we just don't have that information right now. And also you need to be eating enough protein. And you guys know I always talk about that. When we talk about stack, so I have talked about labs and hormones, but there are supplements that specific supplements we can talk more about for ovarian aging and also like peptides. So first of all, supplements, CoQ10 is something that we definitely see. And this is something that's also recommended for fertility. A lot of the egg quality supplements you will see will have CoQ10 in them. I'm on one right now from WeNatal. It's great. And I also like the brand Needed for prenatals. So CoQ10, there was a trial that was done, 169 women under 35 with poor reserve. They dosed them with 200 milligrams 3 times a day, and that's 600 a day for 60 days. So median, the results, 4 eggs retrieved versus 2. There was better fertilization, more high quality embryos. Cycle cancellation was 8% versus 23%. So the honest part here, yes, CoQ10 is actually helpful. It is also very helpful for fertility. And if you are on a fertility journey, 100% you should be taking CoQ10 every single day. And actually, so should your partner as well, if you have a partner. Okay. That has to do with egg health and fertilization, not live birth. That is the one caveat to note with that study. There is no trial that has shown CoQ10 increases live birth. It's just about the fertility aspect of it. Melatonin, this might be surprising to some of you, but there were 10 randomized trials, about 1,200 women. And the dose in most trials was about 3 milligrams, which is quite a lot actually. But people do 5 milligrams and 10 milligram gummies, which is crazy and way more than the human body makes. So clinical pregnancy improved, mature egg count improved, and live birth was actually not significant, only 3 trials, and it was underpowered. So the mechanism is real here. Melatonin is very interesting. So it was generally concentrated in follicular fluid above blood levels and tracks inversely with oxidative DNA damage in the follicle. So every one of those trials gave women the 3 milligram pill, right, during an IVF cycle. Nobody has shown that protecting your own melatonin by sleeping in a dark room does the same thing. The mechanism is real. The lifestyle claim is an assumption. Next up, we have inositol. There's quite a lot of research on this. So Cochrane did 13 trials, about 1,400 women with PMOS. The live birth was uncertain, but the clinical pregnancy was uncertain, and the certainty rated low to very low. So this was surprising. Standard protocol was 4 grams of myo-inositol plus 50 milligrams of D-chiro, and the 40-to-1 ratio. And this is far better marketed than it is validated. So the study behind it is small and actually came from a group closely tied to inositol products. I see this a lot in anything for PMOS and also fertility as well. It's useful for ovulation and insulin sensitivity in PMOS, but nothing for ovarian reserve if you don't have PMOS. And then we have, oh my gosh, there's so many. So we have DHD, and what we see here is that the androgen with real randomized evidence is the prescription one nobody tells you about. And the one with the whole supplement industry behind it did not survive randomization. So this is one, I don't take this very often. I don't think a lot of people do. I think we were taking this more often years ago. But essentially, yeah, like the evidence here is weak. And I'm actually not seeing it in a lot of the fertility supplements anymore. The last two I want to talk about is vitamin D. There was two meta-analyses done, and what they showed essentially was that it does not raise AMH. And then NMN, which people love to talk about, which is another longevity supplement. And I've used NAD, I've used NMN, I've used everything. The systemic review last year found 7 studies in 0 human clinical trials, 5 in mice, 1 in pigs, and 1 in cow eggs, pig eggs and cow eggs. And that the doses that worked were 200 to 500 milligrams per kilogram per day in mice. So for energy and mitochondria, NNN and NAD plus is a completely different discussion than what we're talking about here for your eggs. And last but not least, we have omegas, omega 3. So there was a study, 900 women users had about 50% higher odds of conceiving per cycle after one adjustment. But watch the number move as co-founders were added. So it went to 2.20, then 2.04, then 1.51. That trajectory is the signature of residual confounding. That's interesting. And no trial exists. So what I recommend here, I think omegas are actually great for fertility again. And it's funny that fertility keeps coming up because that's what was getting funded when we talk about longevity. However, again, I think if we're talking about the aging and the ovaries over time, I think that the mechanism there makes sense for the anti-inflammatory effects of something like omegas, even something like fatty 15, which is the C15 omega. However, I don't think that we have enough research to say that taking this over time is going to improve the organ span or the ovary lifespan, essentially. Peptides here, like honestly, there's not a lot. So the one thing we could look at is rapamycin. So there was this trial at Columbia called the Vibrant trial. Now, rapamycin is not a peptide, by the way, but it's under this peptides and prescriptions. So 50 women aged 38 to 45, 5 milligrams orally once a week for 12 weeks is what they were on. And the result was about 20% slower ovarian aging, losing roughly 15 follicles a month instead of 50. And researchers have said publicly it could extend fertility by 5 years. That's incredible. The flags, though. This primary completion was October 2025, and there is still no published paper, so we're waiting for that. The interim number came from about 34 participants, which was not that much, but it is a start. So I'm curious to see where that goes because I definitely think there is more that will come out, especially about rapamycin. Everyone is talking about it. It's such a common thing that we're seeing. So ovarian tissue freezing, I just want to talk about this for a second. The pitch is freeze cortex in your 20s, put it back in your 40s, and delay menopause by decades. Sounds good in theory. For $12,000 to $20,000. The published model says harvest at 21 gives a medium 19-year delay. Harvest at 40 gives 3. And that assumes 80% follicle survival when the real range is 40 to 80%. And the graph lasts about 2.5 years. So this is a model. It's not trial data. Watch it, do not book it. I think we're going to see way more come out about this. This is the type of thing that we should be funding and looking at and researching ovarian tissue freezing. Because what do I do? What if I want to do that in 5 years? How would that impact me in 20 years from now? Would be very, very interesting. What are the side effects, et cetera, that go along with that? Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about here, and I am going to because we are coming short on time and this is a live call, I'm going to skip through the lifestyle component of this. Now, mind you, lifestyle is really important. And I feel like it's in a lot of my other podcast episodes on the EMFs, environment, plastics, sauna, cold therapy, movement, everything like that. And maybe I will do a part 2 to this episode where I go deep into that. And we can also talk about like alcohol, body composition, everything like that. But I do want to talk about the energetics and alignment here because I think this is so important, like I said at the top of the show. So, what do we see when we talk about the ovaries? What do we see in Eastern medicine? And what else is coming through when we talk about this? The pelvic bowl, the pelvis, and what it's actually said to be. So, you have all heard about the sacral chakra version. Orange is the color it's associated with it, sits in the pelvic bowl, and governs creativity, sexuality, pleasure, the seat of creation. And when it's blocked, you can get guilt, shame, and creative stagnation. What I found when I kind of like dug back into this a bit more, this was about 50 years ago, 50 years ago that this type of narrative started to come out about the ovaries. But you could actually go deeper than that. And that was actually from California. So if we look deeper into the history of what the ovaries mean, it's actually way more interesting than like just that, okay? The emotional and psychological meanings were systemized in a book from actually 1987 before that. But the classical Sanskrit text is from 1577. It's crazy. And it says something completely different and much more interesting. Now, I'm going to try say this word in Sanskrit, and I'm not going to say it correctly, but I'm going to try. So, Thana, sorry to everybody who knows how to say that but me. But this means one's own seat, the dwelling place of the self. And the images associated with this are 6 petals, and they are actually vermilion and not orange. And the element is water. And inside it is actually a white crescent moon. And you can actually look this up online, by the way. The seed sound is VAM, like VAM, which the popular version does not get right. And the goddess at the center is Rakini. This is what she looks like, okay? She is dark-skinned. She's 3-eyed. She's on a red lotus. And she's carrying a spear and an axe with fangs and blood at her nostrils. Yeah, it's way different than what you might have thought I was going to say. So hear me out. Just wait, okay? The tradition's own image of the pelvic center is not a soft orange flow of creativity. It's a fanged goddess with an axe. And I find that considerably more useful and actually more empowering. So I say this because I want to bring in more perspective on the ovaries. When we look at Chinese medicine, it's actually different as well. The Chinese medicine version, it's quite beautiful. There are no ovaries in the classical Chinese medicine at all. What it has is the uterus, and the character translates as the child palace. What lives in it is Jing, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, essence inherited at conception. And the texts say Jing cannot be added to, only conserved or spent faster, which is their way of talking about ovarian aging. 2,000 years before anyone could see a follicle, they described a fixed reserve you are born with that you can only spend more slowly. Their text puts the end of fertility at 7 times 7, which is 49. Modern medicine does it at 51. They were off by 2 years, working entirely from watching women. Isn't that crazy? That was 2,000 years ago, guys. That was 2,000 years ago. So the reason that I bring up the Sanskrit and the Chinese medicine here is just to show you, I'm not an expert in either of those things. It's just to show you that like different cultures hold the ovaries and the uterus as a very powerful, powerful place with a lot of respect and love and understanding. So much so that they could predict when your fertility was going to end 2,000 years ago, before we had any type of like modern medical interventions, is actually insane. So understand that there is way more to this than AMH levels and getting everything tested, taking supplements, and menopause. Okay, there's a lot that's going into the ovaries, and there's a lot that's going into them aging over time, and there's a lot of different perspectives. When we look at misalignment, here's what these traditions are pointing at, okay? Underneath these imageries of the goddesses and the flowers, this is the center of receiving, of pleasure, of creating something and letting it come through you rather than forcing it out of you. And this, yes, of course, you think babies, birth, sure. But you can birth a lot of different things in your life. The way that I see misalignment show up in women in this area is almost always the same thing. The same thing. Creating from depletion instead of overflow. Saying yes with your mouth when your body says no. Not listening to your body. Treating rest as something you have to earn and feeling bad when you do take rest. Being unable to receive anything without immediately paying it back. So what that looks like, as a very practical example, is if I give you a compliment and I say, wow, you look great today. And you go, oh, no, you look great. I thought you were like looking really nice too. Like that's you not being able to receive without paying it immediately back. Not being able to receive is a pelvic problem in every one of these systems everywhere. And it is the most common thing I see in high achieving women, including myself. We have a hard time receiving. We do so much for others. I could talk about this for another hour. Women do so much for others. Like, think about just for a second, if you're a mom listening to this, think about what you do for your kids' birthdays. And then what do you get for your birthday? Yeah, just a little example. Let me guess. You plan the birthday party, you spend probably at least what, $500,000 on the birthday party. You get them whatever gifts that they want. And you organize it, you make the food, you make it healthy, you whatever, do all the things. Maybe you go somewhere. And then it's your birthday. And then what do you get? Like maybe breakfast in bed, maybe one of the things that you actually wanted, right? And so that shows that we give, and we have a real hard time receiving. And how do you flip that? Like, what if you created a list and you gave it to your family or whoever, and you said, hey, this is how I would really like to be received. Or this is how I would really like to receive on my birthday. I would like to like go out for a nice breakfast because I don't want the kitchen to be a mess after you guys make breakfast. I would like these things that are on my list. I would like to go spend a night in a hotel by myself. Like whatever it might be. How can you actually receive in abundance and not make yourself smaller when it's on your birthday? Because on everyone else's birthday, you make them the center of the entire world, right? That is like one small example of how I see it happening with my clients. And honestly, like even what I do with myself, and I have to remind myself not to do that. In Chinese medicine, the word for this is stagnation, energy that should be moving and it's not. And the symptom picture they attach to it is the one that you'll recognize immediately. It's like everything I'm talking about. Premenstrual breast tenderness, irritability, cycles that are irregular under stress, and everything getting worse when you are holding something in. That's a really big one. When you're not living your truth, when you're living in misalignment, it can show up in the ovaries. Absolutely, absolutely. They also describe the opposite of flow as things become fixed. So stuck, accumulating in the lower body. And this is where I really want to be clear. I'm not telling you that unresolved emotion gave you a cyst. I'm not telling you that endometriosis is a boundary problem. I'm telling you that typically there's multiple factors and things going on here. And I do not want you to blame yourself for something physical that is showing up and not getting it treated. What I will tell you is the chain that is real. Chronic stress changes your sleep. Sleep changes your menstrual cycle. And the nervous system you live in is the environment every one of your hormones has to operate in. It is all connected. It is all connected, okay? And a little note on quantum physics here and quantum health, because quantum health, I love that. I actually never hear people saying that. but quantum physics is very interesting. And if you read any of Joe Dispenza's work or anyone else in that space, like a lot about this, but the state you are operating from changes what you do. It changes what you say yes to, what you tolerate, how you eat, whether you sleep, and whether you go to the doctor. And that's not mystical. That's not woo woo. That's just facts. That is true. And it compounds over decades. You do not need physics, or you do not even need to understand quantum physics to justify getting coherent. You just need to notice how differently you make decisions when you are regulated versus when you are not. There are practices here that can help. Breath, longer exhales than inhales, stillness without scrolling, like literally stillness, like going to sit outside in the sun, just enjoying it, having meals outside, regulating your nervous system in that way, touching grass, going for a walk, sound baths, visualization. Meditation is huge. I've been meditating every single day, and it's like literally changing my life every day. The Menopause Society graded every mind-body tool in 2023. The two that are formally recommended are the two nobody in wellness talks about: cognitive behavioral therapy and clinical hypnosis, which is crazy. So clinical hypnosis, I just want to talk about these stats for a second. 187 women, 5 weekly sessions, hot flashes went down 74% versus 17% in controls, which is crazy. Okay. That is a near hormone-sized effect from a behavioral intervention. And clinical hypnosis is essentially structured, guided visualization. So the woo thing that actually works is the one nobody calls woo because it got a clinical name, and a randomized trial behind it. So I feel like there's so much more I could say here. And I want to just like close this with my recommendations on the ovaries. And honestly, I should have I should do part 2. Nourishment, protein floor, which means having a minimum amount of protein you're hitting every single day, ideally the more in the morning so that you hit that amount. Ideally 1 gram of protein per 1 pound of ideal body weight. Oily fish 2 to 3 times a week. Refined carbs, keep them low. Nothing ovarian specific at this point, more generalized advice and how it could obviously impact ovaries through correlation. Stack, omega-3, CoQ10 in defined windows, not continuously. Panel rerun on the same cadence at the same lab when you're looking at things like AMH. Take off DHA, don't worry about DHA for now, and NMN for egg quality is not there yet. Sleep is the non-negotiable. Strength training for the downstream organ effect. Plastics and fragrance swaps we really want as clean and non-toxic as possible. Sauna and cold because you like them, not because you're protecting anything. And alignment or align is your practice. We talked about a bunch of different Eastern philosophies here on the ovaries. I personally right now am reading Vanessa Grutman's book, and I'm reading Joe Dispenza, and I'm meditating every single morning for at least 20 minutes. And I am embodying my future self as much as I can and learning how to do that. And like, let me tell you, the difference it makes in your life is incredible. So there's a lot you can do here. You're not left to just like aging ovaries without you being able to do something. This protocol is not just about having kids. It is about the organ that regulates bone density, blood vessels, and your brain. And it's way more than just fertility and it going into decline around 51. Okay. Stop asking your ovaries whether you can still have a baby and start asking them how you're going to age in a better way. So if you have any more questions, I know I grazed over a few things like very quickly. Send me a message. You can always send me email info@biohackingbrittany.com. I am working with clients one-on-one right now as a women's longevity practitioner and a holistic nutritionist. And if you want to join my community and hop on and have the live Q&A with me where I do answer everyone's questions like this one today, you can do that at The Longer Life, and I will link that below. Okay, thank you guys for listening, and I will catch you next week for another episode.